My presentation will be about a study I made at NAU, and the title is Writing Scientific Articles with the Support of Key Lexical Bundles, so a corpus-driven study in the areas of medicine and health sciences. Okay, right. So I will briefly tell you how this idea came up. So how I had this idea of doing this study, which was like in 2019, myself, Professor Simone Sarmento from 𝗟𝗏𝗱𝗀𝗃, Professor Ana Frankenberg-Garcia from the University of Surrey, and Professor Paula Tavares from NESP, we organized a project in which, and submitted it to the British Council, where we would have workshops that aimed at preparing or helping faculty from the two Brazilian universities to improve their academic proficiency, their proficiency in academic genres, specifically articles, academic articles. While we were doing one of these workshops in Porto Alegre, we had people from like professors, participants were professors from different disciplines, so from engineering, from medicine, physics. And when I was talking about one of the resources that we were showing the participants, which was Manchester Phrase Bank, which you might know, which was a resource that was developed by John Morley, in which you have phrases from different sections of the articles. This professor said, wow, what a nice resource. It would be wonderful if we could have something like this for my discipline, specific for my discipline, because Manchester Phrase Bank is not discipline specific. So on that day, I had this idea, wow, so it would be wonderful if we could have a Manchester Phrase Bank that would be discipline specific, yeah. So that's when I had this idea of doing this research project. So I submitted this project to 𝗃𝗄𝗄𝗃, and then I was given the grant, and then I went to NAU as a visiting scholar for 6 months. So I left 𝗟𝗏𝗱𝗃 here in the south of Rio Grande do Sul, and then I went to NAU, and under the supervision of Professor Randy Reppen. It was a wonderful time. I was able to participate of classes, and very nice. So the context of this project then is the internationalization of higher education, so pretty much, where we have English as the lingua franca in academic settings, we all know that, and we're publishing in this language in English enhances the spread of scientific knowledge and citations. So that's pretty much the context. And who is this study for? For Brazilian researchers. So it's not a study that is aimed at students, undergraduate students, but to researchers who already have their projects on their way and they want to write, to publish in English. So I had in mind that my study would be, I wanted it to be corpus-driven, meaning that I would compile corpus and make corpus. So as Professor 𝗃𝗏𝗃𝗀𝗃 𝗪𝗃𝗃 always say, we should let the corpus talk or say what it wanted, right? It would be a discipline-specific project, section-specific, and most important maybe, I wanted that information, the language data would extract from the corpus to inform pedagogical applications. So I wanted to use that information in class. This study, it resulted in an article that is not published yet, to be published. So it was myself, Professor Rosane, Professor Randy Reppen, Cláudia Delfino, and Vivian Lameira, who is one of my advisees. So, having said that, these are some of the topics I'll cover during this presentation. So, talk about what an academic text is, formulaic language, the objects of my study, which are key lexical bundles and key lexical frames, my objectives, So genres and move analysis, the corporate methodology, results, pedagogical applications, and future studies. So during this workshop I mentioned, we would start by talking and telling the students or the participants what an academic text is. And I remember that last week, Professor Viviana Cortes talked about that too, mentioned that. So what is an academic text? It combines formulaic language, and this is a very simple, comment, or so it combines formulaic language and content. So the content is what the researchers know. It's the information they want to share, is their research. So we're not going to teach them that, yeah? They should know, or they usually already know the terms and the terminology of the area they are working with. But the formulaic language is where we can help them. So I just brought an example of the corpus I compiled, just to show that this would be one of the things we could work with. So this is like a formulaic combination of units, so which would be the purpose or the aim or the objective of these, or the present or our study was or is to evaluate, compare, investigate the. So this is pretty much the formula, one of the formulas, one of the possibilities for you to talk about the aim of your study. And then here, in blue, you have the information that the researcher who is doing this study would like to present. So the combination of both would result in part of a bigger unit, bigger academic unit. So that's what I wanted to work with formulaic language. And I mean, formulaic language has been widely studied in the context of academic discourse through corpus linguistics. So I listed some of the references I used. You have the complete references at the end of the presentation. And we all know, I mean, lexical bundles has been defined by Biber et al. 1999 as a recurrent and continuous formulaic sequences. Like, for example, the aim of this paper is. Whereas lexical frames, as presented by Biber 2009 and Gray and Biber 2013, talks about recurrent discontinuous formulaic sequences. So with variable slots that can be internal or external. And here we have an example as, for example, don't 𝗬𝗏2 or it is 𝗬𝗏2. So these were called formulaic frames or lexical frames. So I used lexical frames. So that's what I wanted to study, to examine in the corpus I compiled in this study. But I wanted them to be key, you see. And so what do I mean by key? In this case, key would be something typical of a collection of texts or a discipline or a specific genre or a section when compared to a reference corpus. So that was one of the main points of the study, that I could identify something that was specific for that discipline, or for the discipline I would study. So the objectives of the study were, first, find key lexical bundles. So I first found key lexical bundles. I did not work with key lexical frames at the first point. In the introduction of academic articles, so at this point, in this part of the study, I only worked with the section of the academic articles. And published in English in international journals of medicine, health sciences. And second, I wanted to classify these bundles, these lexical bundles, according to their communicative function in the introduction of these articles. And finally, to suggest some pedagogical applications. So I started, revising some, very important studies, like Swales is 1981. So when talking about move analysis, so Swales presented this CARS model, which later was revised by him in later studies, where he presents moves and steps. So a section of a genre of an academic article, for example, can have different moves, and these moves can have different steps, expressing different communicative functions. So later, Swales inspired many other studies, and I listed 3 that are discipline specific. So the first is Nobu, 1997. So he worked with articles from medicine, and that is hard to pronounce, 𝗃𝗏𝗪𝗂𝗂𝗪, 2005. And this author worked with articles on biochemistry, and she adapted Swales' framework. She devised her own framework of moves and steps related to the biochemistry articles. And that's the framework I used as a reference. And finally, Cortes, 2013, Professor Viviana Cortes, and she worked with 13 different disciplines. And this work inspired me a lot. And what is really important here is that she related lexical bundles and moves. So then, what is the difference between Cortes 2013 and our study? Well, Professor Cortes worked with lexical bundles, and we worked with key lexical bundles and lexical frames. She worked with 13 disciplines. I worked with 1 discipline at this part of the project. And her study was corpus-based, and ours was corpus-driven. So as for the procedures, methodological procedures, well, we start with the corpus compilation, right? Then the extraction of key lexical bundles, and then the classification. So as for the corpus compilation, this was something really time-consuming, you see, but was really, really nice to do that, because Randy, when I was in one of her classes and later in one of our discussions, she told me about this 𝗃𝗏𝗃𝗃𝗃, which is a tool developed by Lawrence Anthony, which allows the automatic compilation of text from different sections of academic articles from different disciplines. So this was really made all the difference in this study, because I wouldn't have been able to compile the corpus of the size I compiled, which I will tell you about later on, if I didn't have this 𝗃𝗏𝗃𝗃𝗃 tool. So the tool crawls text from a platform called PLOS1, and according to the parameters selected by those who were compiling the corpus. So it looks like this. So you go to Lawrence Anthony's site and you download, you choose the system you're working with, and it looks like that. So you see how interesting? You have here, let's say, I was working at that moment, or in this study, I'm working in introductions, but the corpus I compiled had sections, I worked with all the 4 sections. And then you would choose the section, and then you choose the discipline or the area. In this case here, I chose medicine and health sciences, you see, and then which are the categories that are presented in this platform. And then you would click here, create corpus, and then the corpus is compiled. So then you zip the texts, and then you upload it to the tool you want to use to analyze it. So what was the corpus compilation criteria? So again, the introduction sections of academic articles written in English from medicine and health sciences, published between 2003 to 2019, and published in open peer-reviewed international journals. So this platform is an open platform, the PLOS1. It's peer-reviewed, and all the articles are written in English, so it's international. And the reference corpus included the same parameters, but I got introductions from articles from different disciplines, except medicine and health sciences. So and then I had to give a name to the corpus, see? And this was hard to find a name. So I decided I would call it Corpus of Discipline and Section-Specific Academic English, which is 𝗂𝗲𝗃, strange. So the whole corpus, which is not what I'm presenting today, yeah, so because I worked as part of this big corpus, but the whole corpus had 3 disciplines, so medicine, physics, computer science, the 4 sections, and the study corpus consisted of 12 million words, and the reference corpus 60 million words. Well, the one I used for this study is just medicine and health sciences introduction. So the study corpus has 1 million words and the reference corpus 5 million words. So how did I extract the lexical bundles then? So I decided to have like 3 groups, so 4, 5, and 6 word bundles with a minimum frequency of 40, 20, and 10. So this is something I read in one of Professor Viviana Cortes' articles, and it worked very well. So I had, since 6 word bundles, for example, are not as frequent as 4 word bundles, so I used this smaller minimum frequency, and I used different minimum frequencies for each size of bundle, so that I could extract something. Because I want to work with this language data for the creation or for using it in class, I really wanted to extract 6 word bundles. And by doing this, by having like as a minimum frequency of 10, I was able to extract these bundles. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to extract anything with 6 words because they're less frequent, right? And also, the text dispersion would be, I decided that it would be 10, so the bundles would have to be present in 10 or more texts, right? So I uploaded everything, all the study corpus and the reference corpus to Sketch Engine, which is the tool I used to extract the bundles. I went to Ngram. I clicked on the study corpus with 1 million words, clicked in Advanced 6, which would be the Ngram length, and also 4 and 5, but I'm just giving you the example of 6. Then the minimum frequency 10, and then I'd click here in Key Ngrams, and the tool would require the reference corpus, which had already been compiled with 5 million words. And then you click, and you have the results. As for the classification, I'll show you the results later. As for the classification of bundles, so how did I proceed? So I wanted to analyze all the bundles. So I extracted the bundles and I organized them in a table, like bottom up. And then I used this framework from 𝗃𝗄𝗃 2005 as a reference to help me with the classification of the bundles and according to their communicative functions. And then finally, it was very important to say that the classification, I did not have this a priori categories. I want really to observe the data and see what would come up. So as for the results, so I was able to extract 107 units. So 38 with 4 words, 34 with 5 words, and 35 with 6 words. And then I just listed some of them, the ones with highest keenness score, as an example. And so you have things like for the treatment of is the most common, then the present study aimed to, this study was to compare the, so probably here we would have the aim of this study was to compare the, yeah, something like this. And then the classification, which was the hardest part. So what was the procedure here? So I got the framework from that I had mentioned before. I listed it and I started like fitting the information I had into these categories. And it's not very easy because sometimes the one bundle has more than one communicative function in different moves and steps. So you have to go to the context, you have to read and analyze. So it's pretty hard. And then, but here, for example, there are some cases in which you did not have anything. Like, for example, this move to step 2, which is preparing for the present study, raising questions in this specific corpus, in this specific discipline. Nothing appeared, nothing came up in the data. At the same time, in this third move, introducing the present study, and step 1, establishing objectives, you see, wow, amazing, isn't it? For 6-word bundles, we had 27 units. So it really surprised me. So I decided that I wanted to see how they would distribute, you know, along the different moves and steps. And then I organized this graph, which shows very clearly that, for example, in move 3, step 1, it's this big number of bundles. And in others, we don't have anything, you know, so it's 0. Well, so this was the data. And now what do I do with this data? You know, very nice. It took a long time to extract and to classify. So I thought about how would I make this digestible for my students? How can I help my students with this language data? So I thought about 2 possibilities. One would be, and at this time, I started organizing the key lexical bundles in key lexical frames, you know, so the lexical frames started to come up. So the first would be like presenting a frame or creating a frame from one of the key lexical bundles with the highest kiness score extracted from the target rhetorical move. And the second would be to organize all the key lexical bundles from a same communicative function, like those 27 talking about the aim of the study, in a single lexical frame. So I'll give you I'll show you what I did. So for the first, I observed the contexts, you see, and this was done manually, you know. So it would be very time consuming, but I was just discovering things here. So yes, so I observed that there were some things that would repeat, you know, before and after this bundle. And then I organized that into a frame. And then the content would be, you know, associated to that. And one idea I had is that I could have a guide question that would prompt the student into having the content, and then, you know, that information I had collected would fit and would be combined to create a resulting text, a possible resulting text, which would be similar to the one I presented at the beginning of the presentation. I showed at the beginning of the presentation. So thus the primary aim of this study was to investigate the effect of and mechanism of right? So what does this mean? That this is a piece of language, a sort of formula that is actually used in the area that this researcher is working with. So that was the idea. As for the second possibility of organizing the data. This would apply for those those moves in which would have many key lexical bundles, as in this case. So I organized all the bundles in a table. And so again, I noticed that things were recurring. So you see, was or is, to, the verbs, and then you have the present, these, the present, of, you know, objective, aim, purpose. Before we had purpose. And so I put all this information in one frame again. And this is like more the organization that Leiber suggested, with the slots like this, yeah. And in this case, would have the slot with 3 variables, possible variables that would complete the slot of another 3 variables: study, was, is, to, and the verbs, right? So this is what, I mean, 2 ways. Of course, that obviously that you cannot do this second approach if you have 1 or 2 bundles, right? So what happened here was that the key lexical bundles extracted, they were transformed into key lexical frames that could be used in a course, in a EAP course for writing, yeah. And then I thought about showing you what I do. So in an EAP course, I usually start, as most of us do, with the needs analysis. Then I talk about, we identified the genres, that the target genres students want to work with. And then I would go for the, like, talking about the rhetorical structure of the target genre. And then I would fit the language that would be appropriate for each section, for each move, for each step. And then working with practice, production, all these other elements. So I just listed here like one reference, like the book that 𝗪𝗻 𝗪𝗻𝗂, 𝗪𝗻𝗀, and myself wrote, where we have very simple and practical suggestions on how to proceed here. Well, so what would come next? So since I compiled that bigger corpus, what I would do next would be to work with all the sections, not only with the introduction, because I have already compiled the corpus, and I would work with the 3 disciplines, still working with key lexical bundles and key lexical frames. And another thing that came up, and which I thought was really interesting, is the possibility of automatically extracting these lexical frames. And then I got to know about, because I was reading so much, I got to know about different tools that exist, that have been devised, like 𝗪𝗀𝗻 by Lawrence Anthony, phrases in English, 𝗪𝗻 from Greaves, KF 𝗪𝗀𝗻 from Fletcher, and one from Scott. And then you could ask me, why didn't you use these tools if they exist? Well, I tried to use 𝗪𝗀𝗻. 𝗪𝗀𝗻 is really nice, you know, but it did not process my corpus because my corpus was too big. Maybe, I think this was the reason. Yeah, I'm really not sure if this was the case, but so this is something I want to do next. I really want to test all these tools and you know, compare them, and then maybe produce something, because I think this would be quite useful. Okay, and that's it. Thank you very much. So if you want to talk to me, here's my email, and here are my references. Okay, I don't know how long it took. Oh, 33 minutes. That's good. Good. And then I should have questions and answers.
Yes, you do have questions there.
So shall I interrupt the sharing of the screen?
I guess so.
I guess so. Yeah. Okay.
Great.
Right. And then I have questions and answers. Section specific. Okay. Section specific means that it will analyze the different, the language that's specific for each section of the article, right? So that's what I meant by section specific. I would identify those, that language, and I would work with that language. Viviana, why would you say that Cortes 2013 was corpus-based? Maybe not, Viviana. Yes, we can talk about that. Right. So could you please explain in a few words the difference between corpus-based and corpus-driven? Yeah, I would say that corpus-driven is like when you observe the data as it is. So corpus-based, as I see it, sometimes you just have a question and you go to the corpus to see if that is confirmed or not. Yeah, but I used Tony's material, and he explains it very well, yeah, on the difference. But that's pretty much, when you have a corpus-driven study, you go to the data, you analyze the data as it is. Yeah, is the reference corpus from PLOS? Yeah, the reference corpus was compiled from PLOS platform. Yeah. For the word bundles, did you use? And I used words. What did you do with overlapping bundles? For example, yeah. For example, in your table, you have, yeah, is one of the, and yes, and is one of the most. Yeah, you know, what I did with overlapping bundles, and that's something I decided to work with the 6-word bundles. Yes, because I had the 4-word bundles, the 5-word bundles, and the 6. And in some, like you have a 4-word bundle that is inside, overlaps with a 5 or a 6-word bundle. So I decided to focus. So in the second part of the study, I will not work with 4-word and 3-word bundles. I'll go for the 6-word bundles because I thought they are a bigger part of the text. And so for teaching, I have this impression that they are more useful, you know. Well, why do you choose K-move model for your analysis? K-research was biochemistry. Okay. Yes, because this was the closest. So why did I use the framework from Case 2005? Yeah. I worked with medicine and health sciences, and hers was biochemistry. That was the most recent and the closest I found. That's why I used it, you know. Yes, because Nogu's, the first author I referred, who had worked with medicine, it was a very very small number of articles that he used. And so I thought that the biochemistry one was more complete. How do you connect bundles with very specific functions? So how do you connect bundles with very specific functions, topic-related bundles, general functions? So on the basis of, yeah. I don't know if I understood that question. So how do you connect bundles with very specific functions? You know, yeah, that's maybe, I'm not sure if this is what you asked, but the classification was the hardest part. That's why I decided to use a framework to help in the process of classifying the bundles. Yes, and there are some that are, it's very clear because they have this lexical words that make it easier for you to identify their function, whereas with others it's pretty hard. And again, as I mentioned before, some bundles, they have different functions in different moves and in different steps, so you have to go to the context and look at them to be able to classify them. For corpus-based and bundles, you need a list of expressions and see if those expressions are present in the corpus. In corpus-driven, you get the expressions from the data. Yeah, true. Well, in 𝗟𝗏𝗃𝗟, one single paper may overlap across multiple categories. Have you checked the papers? No, I didn't check one by one. Not really. I just, extracted or used the tool, but I didn't check the papers one by one. Yeah, but it's true that they might overlap. Yes. Thanks for the presentation. Did you only study key bundles that were different from other? Yes, from the other disciplines. Yeah. Would you not be interested in keenness similarity? Yes, maybe, but I have to choose. I had to, focus on one thing. Otherwise, I wouldn't finish. I wouldn't be able to do anything. Just for clarity, is the study you presented intended to contribute with writers of academic texts that are native speakers of English or English learners? Actually, I don't use the concept. Instead of the concept of native speakers, I prefer specialized writers, more or less specialized writers. So I'm focusing here researchers, Brazilian researchers, who are who have their research projects and who want to have, to improve their texts, their academic texts. But yes, I am not thinking about undergrad students, you see. I'm thinking about more experienced researchers. Or, have you tested your frames? Not yet. With real students, not yet. Because now we don't, with all this situation we're facing now, and also we didn't have workshops with the researchers yet. So we're thinking about having them. But no, I haven't tested. What rhetorical moves do you commonly teach your students in terms of an EAP course? It depends on the genre. Yes, what I usually do is I get the examples and I try to identify the moves, and then we use some studies that have already been done, and then we compare. I try to construct this with the students. So it depends on the genre. Do you think we might have different bundles in different disciplines? Yeah, I think so. Do you think we might have different bundles if different disciplines are investigated? Yes, I do believe so. I started working with the other two areas, which are physics and computer science. And I noticed that, for example, just one example, I'm not talking about bundles, but I'm not sure if it's with computer science or physics. They don't use a study. And study was really frequent in medicine and health sciences. If I'm not mistaken, they use research or something like that. And so obviously, all the other bundles might be there, but the most frequent, I believe, there is a difference. There is variation. Yeah. How do you deal with overlapped bundles such as? Well, again, that's what Viviana had mentioned, such as to the best of our knowledge, the 6-word bundle can be divided, yes. But then again, what I want is to have a bigger piece of language that's like formulaic so that I can work with my students. So that's why I prefer to work with longer bundles, to have a bigger piece of language, and this is more useful for the students. So that's why I'm not really, working with 4-word or 5-word bundles anymore. In the next stage of the study, I'll be focusing 6-word bundles or maybe longer. And could you please repeat your email? Yes. Yeah, it's in the presentation. Oh, right here. It's Ana.Bocorny @gmail.com. Apologies if you have already mentioned it. Where the texts from your corpora written by, I don't know, no natives, no native. Yeah, remember, I consider that, I believe that if they have been published in that specific journal, international journal, I consider them to be adequate. Yeah, what I could have done, and that was the original idea, was to get high impact journals, you see, and then compile the corpus using that, the articles from these journals. But then it would be much harder to compile the corpus because I wouldn't be able to use 𝗏𝗏𝗃𝗏, you know, and it would have taken much longer. So, so I assume they were written, I don't know, they were written by people who were able to publish the articles, and this platform is peer-reviewed, so, you know, yeah. But yes, one could think that maybe they are not the best, you know, articles. Yeah, well. So, no início sua fala, você mencionou o projeto Lumina. Você poderia falar um pouco mais a respeito? Yes. So, Lumina Idiomas, Lumina is a MOOC platform from 𝗏𝗏𝗃𝗏𝗃, and Lumina Idiomas is the project that that is related to languages, specifically academic languages, and it's just being constructed. So, it's what we call a learning environment. Yeah. And it's where we usually put whenever you create something in terms of like a resource or a tool, you put this there, but it's under construction, so still needs much work to, you know, to have. So we have a glossary that is being constructed by the students. Is also have like a tool that helps students to create article reviews. And when I finish this part of the project, I'll possibly create a resource and put it there. So, do you think 𝗏𝗏𝗃𝗏𝗃 did justice to corpus compilation? Did you have any problems with balance and representatives of the disciplines and its sub-disciplines you have selected? Yeah, again, as I said, maybe 𝗏𝗏𝗃𝗏𝗃 is not the best option because it crawls articles from this platform. But this is something I discussed with Grande when we were compiling the corpus. And that's something she said, well, Ana, these articles have been peer-reviewed and they are published in an international platform. So I think it is okay for you to use it. And I think the results, but I think it would be very interesting to compare, you know, the results that we get and the bundles that you get using 𝗏𝗏𝗃𝗏𝗃 and +1, the platform, with another corpus of articles from, let's say, the highest impact journals. Yeah, could be. Sorry, I just have to turn on the lights. It's getting dark here. Okay. So thank you so much for your presentation. I'd like to ask some questions. Why do you use a reference corpus, a corpus both with texts from other disciplines? Well, yes, because I wanted to get what is specific for that area, and then that something I decided to compile a corpus of articles as well, you know, just to get what is specific from the area. Do you consider also collocations or just lexical bundles? Lexical bundles, yes. Why did you choose such dispersion threshold 10? Because I tested some other, you know, minimum frequencies, and I wanted to get, as I said before, I wanted to get results. So if I had used like 40, I wouldn't get, like, I would get about, I mean, I don't remember the exact number, but a smaller number of 6-word bundles. So that was the reason why I used a smaller minimum frequency. Can you tell us how your findings for the medicine health areas differed from the ones available in Manchester Phrase Bank? I really didn't compare. This would be very interesting, something very interesting to do. Yeah, but I really didn't compare my results with the ones, the information or the bundles you have in Manchester Phrase Bank. Did you try using CQL to generate frames? No, I was talking to the people from Sketch Engine, we were thinking about creating a way of extracting the lexical frames working through Sketch Engine. But then what happened was that they were working in other projects. At the time I was in the US, and so after that we did not talk about this anymore. But I really I could not do that. I would need someone to help me doing. I know what I want, but I don't really know how to do that. Yeah. What did you do with annotation? Did Sketch Engine do it? Yeah, Sketch Engine does it. Annotates. Yeah, it's automatic. The move steps that have been yielded from your findings could also be applicable to EAP students from other fields, other than health or professional areas. I don't think so. You know, yeah, maybe. But if you want something that is it really has to do with what is used in that discipline, I think it would be really interesting, really important to, compile a corpus from the other disciplines, articles from the other disciplines. And that's exactly what I want to do. And then I want to compare to see if the results are different. Yeah. Why do you call them bundles? Literature and in the tools you tried. Yeah, because they have some frequency according to the definition. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Marcus, could you let me know? There is such a study which could be applied to the writing of academic papers in Portuguese. I think Larissa is working with that. Yeah, Larissa. Academic papers in Portuguese. I think she's Larissa 𝗪𝗏𝗪𝗏. I'm not sure, but I think she's working with academic papers in Portuguese. Have you decided to study a corpus of medicine and health science in specific sections before knowing about the possibility of automatic extraction by software you used or later? I'm asking this because generally compilation process takes too long. Yes, true. If done manually and well, I tried to. Two different things. The compilation process. Let's see if I understood your question. Have you decided to study a corpus of medicine and health before knowing about the possibility of automatic extraction? Yeah. No, I tried the automatic extraction, but as I said, because my corpus was too big, that's what Randy and I were considering. It did not process the corpus. And then I was talking to Viviana, when she was here in Brazil, and she told me that it might be because I'm using Mac. But I tried with other computers as well, but it was really hard. And it's a pity because I think Ngram is such a wonderful tool. It would be, perfect to automatically extract all this information, especially if you're working as a teacher and you don't have you don't have the time to do all this, process of extracting information from a corpus. So what kind of assignments do you ask your academic writing students? Well, pretty much we work with as I mentioned, with the structure, the rhetorical structure of the genre. and then we start analyzing examples, and then working with the language, and then producing the texts and working with feedback. Yeah. Did you use any particular framework of communicative functions to classify? I used that framework I mentioned from the author that started with K, 2005. That's the framework I used. And is 𝗏 yeah, not 𝗏. Working only with English texts, yeah. No, I'm not sure. 𝗏, I'm not sure. And 𝗏𝗏𝗃, the one that generates, that crawls the texts to compile the corpus, works only with this platform I mentioned, with PLOS ONE. And then the texts are only in English. Daniel Martins, do you think that teaching these bundles in academic writing can increase the rate of false plagiarism? That's a good question, isn't it? I think Viviana mentioned this last in her webinar last week. I really don't think so, you know, because these are like formulas. What really counts in a way at the end of the day is like the content, the information you are conveying based in your studies, you know. So I don't think so. Have you compared Brazilian and English academic writing in terms of lexical bundles? Brazilian and English academic writing in terms of lexical bundles, pattern research. No, I don't work with Portuguese. I work only with English. Yeah, and 𝗏𝗏𝗃. So, and 𝗏𝗏𝗃 is just texts in English, yes. What was the advantage of to sketch engine compiling? What was the advantage of 𝗏𝗏𝗃 to sketch engine in comparison? It's because, well, I know sketch engine has a feature that crawls texts. I have never used it. And because I started using 𝗏𝗏𝗃 and I liked it, I thought it was, you know, it did what I wanted, which was making it possible for me to get the sections, the different sections of the article, like introduction, materials and methods, results, conclusion. So that's what I wanted. And you know, doing this for various disciplines. So that's what I wanted. And I didn't even, I didn't use Sketch Engine for the compilation of the corpus, just for extracting bundles, yeah. Could you repeat the name of the platform, a database you compile the corpus from? Well, so the tool was 𝗏𝗏𝗃 from Lawrence Anthony, and the platform he used, because this is, you know, he crawls the text from this PLOS ONE platform. If you Google it, PLOS ONE, you'll see it to come, and it's a huge platform, you know, with different areas. So did you find anything surprising in terms of medical writing? What you found in the corpus? But what really surprised me is the fact that we had so many bundles for AIM, you know. It was really amazing. But not really. I think that's, you know, the usual things typical from that area, yeah? Lexical bundles are continuous, and when you make them lexical frames, that's when they become discontinuous. Yeah, because the frames, they have the slots, you see. You have a sequence of words with slots that vary. So, you know, and like the aim, the purpose, the objective. So this is a slot. And then you have the variables, different words that can complete that slot, you know. The corpus. Okay, great. Yes, Simon. Yes. Lexical bundles are continuous. Yes, I answered that. When they become discontinuous, when you have when the lexical bundles become discontinuous, when they have the possibility of more than one word to complete that specific slot. You know, it's not the the complete sequence, like 4D, no. Well, when you can change, you know, the words to complete that specific slot. I don't think I answered this question. Okay.